Welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week we will discuss tools, tips, and ways to radiate your best life ever, interviewing practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate? Hi, today we are going to radiate perspective with Stephanie Red Feather. I've been looking forward to doing this for some time. I think this is going to be a very fascinating discussion, and I think something that is going to be helpful for so many of our listeners and people who are just finding themselves in a place where they're not quite sure what's going on. They feel like they're responding to many energies. They might be awakening, and I think this is going to be very, very useful and very helpful. So welcome, Stephanie. I really appreciate you coming in to talk to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So Stephanie has written a book that's going to be published in November of 2019 by Inner Traditions Press, and it's called Evolutionary Empath, which I think is fascinating. We were kind of geeking out a little bit earlier about the grand scheme, the big picture. So empaths are something that is kind of a buzzword right now, right? Mm-hmm. And so many people are saying, "Oh, I'm an empath. My children are empaths," but we might not know what that means. Right. So yeah. Tell me about why you started to write this book. What are you hoping to do with it? Maybe even start off with what to you qualifies as an empath, right?
Right. Well, and just like you said, it is common vernacular in a lot of spiritual circles or New Age circles. People say empath. We have a general idea of what that means.
Exactly.
But honestly, when I wrote this book, the only directive that my guidance gave me, my guides, if you will, was create a definition.
Nice.
And so at first I was like, oh yeah, no pressure, okay. Where do I start? But it started to congeal, and it is not a simple, like if I had to give the abbreviated version, an empath is a highly sensitive person.
Okay.
That is what's common, the most common attribute,
right.
But that's not the whole picture.
Right.
And so the way this lined up for me was I had a long list of qualities, like experiences empaths usually have, the way they react to the world, how their sensitivities show up. And I put it all into categories. And I ended up creating the 5 qualities of an empath.
Wonderful.
And then a definition, which is like a paragraph long, because to me there's just a lot of parts to it. So to briefly go over the 5 qualities. One is we have a very open energy field, which makes it easy for us to blend and merge with other people. Mm-hmm. Blend and merge with any other energy, really, sentient being, animals,
right.
and plants and trees and rocks
even
as well.
Places and locations, right?
Yes, yes. The second quality is our highly sensitive nervous system. Mm-hmm. So we tend to the human nervous system is pretty amazing anyway, but for empaths, it's like on steroids. Mm-hmm. And so, that makes self-care very important for us, and that predisposes us to getting easily overwhelmed and overstimulated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The third quality is being predisposed to access other dimensions, the subtle energies, so anything from seeing the dead, reading the Akashic records, working with subtle energies, being an energy healer, seeing the auras on things, and on and on and on and on. Those things tend to be more easy for us to do. Mm-hmm. The fourth quality is we put a high price, or we desire very deeply harmony and peace in our lives, more than just, gosh, I've had a hard day and I'd like, to sit on my deck and watch the deer. I mean, we are very tuned into and can perceive dissonance as opposed to resonance. And so harmony means harmony in our relationships, harmony in our environment. I know personally I'm constantly tweaking things if the energy doesn't feel right, just to create that energetic harmony.
Right.
And then the fifth quality is that we have very giving hearts and desire to be of service, which when we live from an unconscious place means we tend to give of ourselves until there's nothing left and put everybody else first and ourselves last. So that's the abbreviated version of the 5 qualities.
And I do think that the people who self-identify as empaths at least understand that there's a certain sensitivity about it. But we're not talking about sensitivity as in terms of just getting your feelings hurt easily, of being sensitive to injustice. Are we? I mean, it's more than that. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yes. And I've kind of, it's new ground here, so there's like new language and new ways to define things that are coming into this bigger conversation around being an empath. Right. And what I've kind of characterized is that we have an energetic physiology that is a little bit different than the quote average person.
Yes.
And so we perceive things that other people don't perceive. Right. And let me also preface it by saying, for the most part, most empaths live from an unconscious place with their gifts. Like, just because most of us didn't have the mentors, the parents, the teachers who recognized what we were and who could help us, we live from the shadow aspect of the qualities. We live from the unhealthy aspect of the qualities. Absolutely. We live unconsciously with this aspect of ourselves until we don't, until we learn what it is and then start making some changes. And so when we're in that unconscious space, we don't have a context for what's happening. Right. It's like, am I crazy? You know, so many people that I talk to have been told, you're too sensitive, you're fragile, you're too emotional. Why do you cry so much? You're weird. You're not really seeing what you think you're seeing. And I think of it kind of a sort of lighthearted example of a child that has make-believe friends, and up to a certain age, a parent expects that. But then at some point, okay, I don't want to hear about your make-believe friends anymore. You're coming into, weird. You shouldn't do that. While the child is sitting there going, but really, that's great Aunt Edna over in the corner, and she has a message. No, I don't want to hear about your, So there's so many experiences like that where we feel, see, hear, perceive energies, entities, life forms, communication that other people don't. Right. And because we're so sensitive, so many things can overwhelm us. Light, certain qualities of light, sound, too much stimulation from noise or large crowds or mechanical equipment, or just all of the things that are
EMFs and other types of inorganic frequencies around us, right? Scents, odors, emotions.
Yes, all of it.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that was true for me is I took on everybody else's emotions,
right,
and I didn't know I was doing it.
Yes.
And so there were times when I felt schizophrenic because I'm like, what? I didn't feel this way 5 minutes ago. Why am I wanting to claw my own eyes out? Why am I all of a sudden a walking Molotov cocktail? Why am I, it's like, where did this come from? And I just thought I was imbalanced or probably had some undiagnosed mental condition. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely. I'm finding, too, that there are some who hadn't been that way, and then all of a sudden something switched for them, and all of a sudden they became sensitive to things where these people could thrive and tolerate large crowds, going to the mall, going to a big game, going to a rock concert. But then something happens, something switches, and then they find that they can't tolerate big crowds, right? Are you finding the same thing?
The way I think of that is for whatever reason, many of us had to take those qualities and go underground with them. We had to wear a mask. We had to pretend those things didn't exist. We had to be whatever definition we were given of what is normal or successful or whatever. So along with this journey is also a bigger sort of archetypal journey of coming back into your own, rediscovering your authentic self. And when I think of those moments where something happens, where something gets triggered or a switch gets flipped, I think of it as the soul can no longer tolerate the inauthenticity, and everything comes to a head, which isn't usually pretty.
Right.
It often comes in the form of crisis.
It does.
That forces us to recognize where we have been lying to ourselves, where we've been hiding our authentic self and our true nature.
Yes.
And so there is this crisis period of just working through all of that.
Right. I tell you, I get contacted by people every week. Say, I found you online. I feel like I'm going crazy. I just have to talk to somebody who understands and hopefully try to put some of this into place. Are you finding that as well?
Yes, and I've kind of coined it the Empathic Bigbang.
Love it.
Yes, because
Right?
in geologic terms, 100 years is a blink of an eye.
Right.
And so even 100 years ago, there were not many empaths incarnated on the planet.
Okay.
Yeah, and if there were, they struggled.
That's what I'm wondering. If maybe there were, but they were so underground, they so misunderstood, maybe locked away in an institution somewhere.
Yes, yeah, like they couldn't cope. They had to
Right.
develop wicked coping skills, and oftentimes went into, some kind of, alcohol or drugs or some kind of addiction or
Right.
something to cope.
Right.
Now, I would also say that there are certain pockets of different cultures and civilizations where that quality is valued, it's cultivated, it's recognized, it's
Yes.
honored, or for the cultures that have, shamans, priests, priestesses, medicine men, medicine women, the monks, the nuns, like positions, if you will, that are kind of preordained. Like it's expected that they're a little different, that they have different perceptions, that they can connect to spirit or God or source. Then that's acceptable because it's like you're in that position
You're special.
for the community, but the rest of us aren't.
Right.
So still in the grand scheme of things, there were not many empaths. And now there's just been literally this explosion.
Seems like it.
And there's a bigger picture that all of this is happening inside of as well. And so yes, there are a lot of people waking up in droves going, who am I? What am I? What's important to me? The life I've been living that I thought was supposed to make me happy or create success isn't working, and they're seeking themselves, they're seeking authenticity, and they're seeking people who've gone through it too, so they don't feel like they're walking the path alone.
So they have some perspective with it. And earlier you were talking about, I believe the term you used was shamanic death. So can you say a little bit about that? Because I wonder if some of the people waking up to this stuff are going through something like that.
I would say yes. I have shamanic training. I study and practice in a Peruvian tradition of shamanism called the Pachakuti Mesa tradition. My master's and doctorate are in shamanic studies. So I feel like I see the world through a shamanic lens.
Yes.
And so a shamanic death process is, you can just think of it as a symbolic death. My belief, my experience is that as humans, we go through times in our life where we are dying while we're alive. That we are dying to old habits, an old way of being, a belief system, something that doesn't work for us anymore, and in a way forces us to that crisis point where we can no longer sustain it. We may not know what the new choice is.
Right.
And we can either go willingly or we can go clawing and screaming.
Right.
And I did plenty of the clawing and screaming and gnashing of teeth and cussing at God and trying to force things to happen the way I wanted to. And so recognizing when one of these death cycles is upon us is, I believe, so important because it helps us kind of embrace it like an old friend in a way, like, oh yes, there you are again. I remember you. I would like to go as gracefully and consciously into this as possible because the more we fight, the more we get in our own way. And the inevitable is going to happen, and all we're going to do is postpone it and make it more painful when we fight against it. And so I think for so many people waking up, there's a death to the old self, a death to the way they thought the world worked, a death to the way they operated in the world and interacted with the world and the principles they thought the world worked with. You know, a shamanic death or a symbolic death can happen in a bunch of different ways. Long, short, intense, easy. They happen multiple times over the course of our life.
Well, and if you think about it, now you're certainly not the same person you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and constantly recycling. I think that we see this in popular culture, you know, maybe as a way to condition us to it. Like, I'm thinking of the Matrix specifically, where you take the red pill and then you can't see anything the same way ever again. And I know with so many people coming to this awakening, they just can't go back to their old beliefs, their old friends, their relationships.
Yeah, I laughingly say this because otherwise I would be crying, but it's I laughingly say, you know, once you've been awakened, you can't go back to ignorance.
No, you can't.
Which is
that's our comfort zone.
Spoiler alert.
Right?
You know, it sucks because you can never go back to the point of not knowing. And sometimes walking in consciousness is excruciating.
Well, and it's excruciating too because we have people in our lives who you would just love to shake into awareness. I have people in my family, I would just love to shake them and say, you don't have to live in this pain. There's so much more. But, of course, we can't do that for others.
Yeah, and we live in, there's so many different perceptions of reality. And so when we become more aware, at least my experience has been, it's difficult to show up and be fully present and conscious and in my body in the face of so many things happening in our world.
It's painful.
That don't make sense, that seem like we're moving backwards, that are such incredible injustices. That's what I mean by the excruciating part, is once you wake up, it's...
You see it all. You open your eyes and you see
and you feel it.
Yes, absolutely. I think the last couple of years have been really hard for a lot of people. We're seeing just a skyrocketing in anti-anxiety medications. Psychologist offices are full because people are just waking up and seeing what's going on around them.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about the evolutionary piece because that is fascinating. Just our little conversation a minute ago, that was very interesting. So, yeah, the evolutionary piece. Why the evolutionary empath?
Yeah. When I started to write this book, I've led empath workshops and discussed that content with clients and other classes that I've taught for a long time. And so I knew I was going to gather that information, and then it started to reorganize itself. And then as I kept writing, it's like I kept getting new downloads of higher levels of perspective, and the title of the book changed several times. I was kind of like, okay, Spirit, if you're going to give me a download, can I just have one instead of, do we have to keep changing things?
Exactly.
But what really came in is this higher level perspective of where we are on a cosmic scale and the grand cycle of time that can help us understand that showing up in the body we showed up in with the sensitivities that we have and this energetic physiology that I'm talking about is not random. We are here as empaths for a very specific purpose. And so I'll take you into that cosmic perspective. It's in the book I devote a whole chapter to it because it can be a bit scientific.
I love that.
And so I'll try to keep it very much layman's terms. But there is a grand cycle of time that over 30 ancient cultures have documented or tracked in some form or fashion. And there are differences of opinion in the academic and scientific communities as to how long the cycle is. I won't go into why. Some say it's 24,000 years. Some say it's 26,000 years. I'm working with the 24,000-year model, but the most important thing to take out of this is there is a cycle. We just haven't figured out precisely the exact length yet, but 24 and 26,000, they're not that far off from each other.
Right.
So there's this 24,000-year cycle of time, and different cultures have broken that period into different chunks, and so the one most people are going to be familiar with is the Greek ages.
Oh,
so
yes.
the Iron Age, Bronze Age, Silver Age, Golden Age.
Yes.
And so what this cycle of time points to is the rise and fall of human consciousness. So for 12,000 years, we're ascending in consciousness up to the height of the Golden Age. 12,000 years, we're descending in consciousness down to the depths of the Iron Age. And so these movements, if you will, as I started studying it and going into more detail, and then there was all of this other scientific, astrophysical stuff and planetary things, because I have a very strong connection to the star relatives, and so I just started geeking out, and as an aside, my guides are telling me, you need to go there, you need to buy some books, you need to go to this conference, you need to do some research, so there's, who knows what that's going to turn into. But that's very exciting. But in terms of this cycle, what's important to pluck out of that is we are on the ascending side. Again, because we lost so much knowledge as we descended into the last dark ages, if you will.
Right.
Again, we can't specifically point to a text and say, precisely on this day is when this thing happened. So again, it's more important to look at the generalities, that whether you look at the Vedic texts or you look at the Mayan calendar or different sources, most of them are going to point to a relatively narrow range of time as the depth, if you will, or the lowest point on the cycle. So we are out of the Iron Age, and we are several hundred years into the Bronze Age. So empaths are here because it's time.
Yes.
The world is ready. We are raising in consciousness. We are, and there's so many other books and spiritual guides and authors that talk about the gene keys and dormant DNA and things that are being activated and all of these different levels of consciousness. And to me, I believe all of this speaks to the same process, if you will, that we are ascending in consciousness. Our vibration is changing, and we are at a point now where our configuration, if you will, as humans, our physical, energetic configuration is changing, shifting in response to this raising in consciousness.
Yes.
And so, I don't know if you've seen the movie Moneyball, but there's a quote in there that says, the first guy through the wall always gets bloodied.
Yes.
So anytime you're breaking new ground, anytime you're in the jungle with the machete hacking the path, all of us here as empaths right now are the first ones through the wall, in a way, getting bloodied. So I don't say that to be morbid, but to hopefully give some encouragement and perspective that your soul chose for you to come into this body right now, at this point, in human evolution on purpose, because you are here to help humanity evolve to the next level of consciousness. And the souls that are making this choice right now are courageous souls, because we are breaking this ground again. We are the ones, and you know, there are so many people I've spoken to who feel like the black sheep in their family.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Weird one.
Yes.
And so I've said, is it possible, have you considered that instead of your parents or your family being here to teach you, that maybe you're here to teach them?
Hi, this is Christy. I just want to say that we here at Radiate Wellness hope you are enjoying this podcast. It's free to you, and we hope that you find it informative and inspirational. Heck, even fun. We have just 3 small asks of you to help us radiate growth. First, please hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on. That way, you'll receive a notification every time that we have a new podcast episode out. Next, please give us a thumbs up, a like, or a 5-star review. If you're feeling inspired, a positive review wouldn't hurt. These 2 small things will help others find us when they're searching for great podcasts. Finally, please tell your friends about the Radiate Wellness podcast. Better yet, show them how to find us and how to subscribe. If everyone did that, we would double our audience. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it.
So maybe we're here to teach the
Yes.
others in our family. Yes.
Yes. And so we are the oddballs. We are the weird ones. We came into this body knowing that it was going to be hard because we didn't have the predecessors. We didn't have the ones who paved the way for us. We're the ones doing the paving. And we're connecting into the morphic field of the empath. I think of it as a living field of intelligence that exists. And I think there's a living field of intelligence for any topic or subject that you could think of. That as humanity's consciousness started to devolve, it was almost like these repositories where the intelligence, the wisdom, the knowledge, the teachings were never lost.
Right.
They were just held in trust in these kind of energetic fields, if you will. And as we are swinging back around, we are at a place where we are recognizing and connecting with these energetic fields of intelligence, the morphic field of the empath.
So we're tapping into them and connecting with these bodies of intelligence, these bodies of knowledge that have laid dormant, perhaps.
Or just waiting for us.
Waiting for us,
Waiting
yes,
for us
in
to
trust.
come. And, of course, there are many pockets of civilizations, again, the shamans, priests, priestesses, monks, nuns, holy appointees, who took so many of these mysteries, what we're calling mystery schools, the wisdom teachings, these ancient texts that held all of this knowledge, and they went underground or up the mountain or in the cave to hold these things until humanity was ready for them again. So we have the physical anchoring of them still on the planet, and then we have this energetic field of consciousness that are starting to connect up again, and it's time for so many, and I don't just mean empathic mysteries, I mean mysteries of all kinds, the celestial realms and the sexual mysteries and
Divine feminine.
the divine feminine and the herbal mysteries and all of these things that we all, I can only imagine, we all knew and practiced and understood as just the way the world worked. We're swinging back up into that again.
That's exciting. We're just really on the leading edge in a way to rediscover, but it's not maybe not the leading edge because it's not that new.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, I use the phrase quite often that, especially if I'm facilitating a mystery school or doing some kind of work with students or clients, that I'm not teaching you something or exposing you to something that you don't know.
Right.
I'm creating a space for you to remember, to have your own experience with that intelligence, with that wisdom, with that field, because we've all been there before. And so it's a matter of connecting back in with those relevant past lives, with whatever pieces of soul knowledge we collected along the way that we want to call forward into this present moment to support us and assist us.
Absolutely. So how can we as empaths move through this painful evolution to wake up to the things that we know back there somewhere? How do we usher ourselves through this painful period?
That's a long answer.
It was a long question, fair enough.
and it's one that I feel challenged to answer, because I want to give everybody all the information, and I know that we're limited, and so, excuse me, I tried to put as much into my book as possible, but there's several pieces to it. One is just the first steps of awareness.
Yes.
You cannot change your relationship to a thing if you're not aware of that thing.
Yes.
So the first part is coming into consciousness, accepting, owning, recognizing I'm an empath. And it's this way with anything. Once we recognize it, acknowledge it, now we have the power to make a choice around it, because when we don't know about it, when we're not aware of it, we can feel like a victim. We can feel like the world is being done unto us, that we don't have any choice.
Right.
And so when we can say, I am an empath, that gives us the power back to make a choice about, okay, how do I want to proceed with this? How do I change my relationship with it? And I speak oftentimes in terms of shifting our relationship from looking at these qualities as a liability to being an asset. And that takes some time. It takes some mindset shifts. It takes tools. So the next piece after that recognition is the tools. And by tools, I mean energetic hygiene practices, managing your energy, clearing your energy, getting familiar with your own energy boundaries, having a daily check-in process multiple times a day, preferably, where you're checking in, you're clearing your field, you're tending to it, and what goes right along with that is boundaries. As empaths, almost universally, we suck at boundaries.
We do.
Because our nature is to blend and merge. That's what's easy for us. It's easy for me to feel you, to take on, not just empathize, but become you. To reconfigure myself to fit inside of you and see the world through your eyes and feel the world through your emotions. And so boundaries are one of the big challenges for empaths, where we can figure out where we end and the next person begins. And develop all of those healthy, how to say no, how to ask for what you need, and all of the variations on that.
How to understand what's yours and what's not.
Exactly. How to stay out of codependence. That's one of the big pitfalls for empaths is codependence. So there's the boundaries and the energy piece, clearing yourself, tending to your field. Those are really huge, important pieces. And then there are other things that I speak of as well. Self-care is a bigger topic that these boundaries and energy practices can fit inside of. Self-care for empaths is not a luxury. It is an absolute necessity. And what self-care looks like for us doesn't look like the average person. It's not
a mani-pedi and massage.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. It is really understanding. It's let me say it this way. It's learning to recognize what feeds us and what drains us. So kind of thinking of it as our energetic bank account. What practices do we need to engage in to keep our bank account full? So for me, and I know for a lot of people, time in nature. I really reground and recenter when I'm with nature, with animals, feeling the sun, the breeze, hearing water, hugging a tree, literally, flopping face first into the grass.
Yes.
Whatever that is for each individual. Time alone.
Yes.
Energetic practices, whatever your daily energetic and spiritual practices are. Monitoring and managing your exposure to other people. Doesn't matter if you love them.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you get along great with them. There's still a point at which, the engine goes, and we just,
Right, that you get full of the other person's energy, and it's like, okay, I just need to disengage. I know personally there are times when I just can't, even with the texts and the emails, it's like, no, I just have to be with myself right now. Yeah, and that's not being selfish. Sometimes the boundary is to keep yourself in, not to keep others out.
Correct.
Right? Good. So, in addition to boundaries, what can we do? Do you feel? And then I would like to ask too, how do we have this energetic knowledge of ourselves, or this energetic hygiene? But so, however you would like to answer that.
Yeah, there's a lot of techniques. So this could be a whole entire weekend workshop.
Right.
First of all, everything is a process. One of the things I really resisted in writing the book, because it just felt out of alignment, was our love of the Cosmopolitan Survey.
Oh my God.
Answer these questions,
Right.
and if you 5 to 10 means you're a mild empath, and 11 to 16 means you're a moderate empath, and here's how to do this in 10 easy steps, and it's just, my experience of life is not that way.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way. There is no switch that you flip. It is a process. Everything is a process. It takes time. It is a spiral path. It is not a linear path. You don't do A and then B and then C. What happens is you do A and you recognize that N and Q and P and L are all being affected at the same time, and so there's this kind of
soup.
Yeah, there's this journey where multiple things are being affected and growing and shifting all together in a package. And so what I have experienced with a lot of empaths is, in the process of trying to fit into the world, we had to disengage or unplug a lot of those receptors inside of us. So the parts of us that helped us tune into our knowingness, that helped us understand our truth, that helped us listen to our body, because our body and our emotional system has the answers. It will tell you in a second how you feel about something.
Yes.
But
if we listen.
Correct. And that has never been, for most cultures, especially Western society, that has not been a valued technique.
Right.
And so it gets ignored, it atrophies, and so much of our process of reclaiming ourselves and coming back into our power as empaths is doing our internal work of plugging, looking at everything that got disengaged or snipped and plugging it back in so that we can start up that feedback loop, so that we can hear ourselves, so that we can tell, oh gosh, I'm angry. Oh gosh, I'm tired. I'm hungry. I didn't like that. I overstepped my own boundary. I
allowed something. It's mindfulness. It goes back to mindfulness. Absolutely.
So that needs to happen for a lot of people,
right? So
that they can have something to work with. It's hard to ask for what you need when you don't even know what you need. And so I recognize that it's not just as easy as, I just need to ask for what I need. It's like, what do I need? I can look back at so many years of my life where I really didn't know myself. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I needed. I thought I did. No clue.
No clue. Well, you were such a different person then, too. That does remind me. I always like to find out how people got to where they are now. So have you always done shamanistic work and work with empaths?
Well, it's one of the one of the tools, I'll answer the question, but I'm going to backtrack a second to get
there.
You got it. Another big piece that's important for empaths is relocating our center, figuring out our center and staying in our center. And so in the book, I give a lot of exercises of how to do that. There's a lot of different ways to approach that.
Wonderful.
But for some of us, if we can remember our childhood, oftentimes those early years will give us a clue as to who we really are before the world started creeping in too much and affecting us. And so as a child, I was very intuitive. I was very creative. I loved nature. I was born in 1969, so I grew up in the 1970s, so I don't know if you remember the little crocheted 1970s drawstring bags.
Oh, heck yeah.
But that was my little I was like a little medicine woman before I knew what that was. I had rocks and sticks and costume jewelry, and they were like my little magic trinkets, and I played, you know, of course, cowboys and Indians. I was always the Indian. I have very strong Native American, you know, pull. I love horses. I loved climbing trees and being outside, and I was, you know, my mom said that I could always tell when somebody was upset, and I would climb up into their lap and somehow instinctively knew. So the seeds of all of that, I can look at my childhood and I can see the seeds of those authentic pieces before the world happens and you go to school and you are told that you're wrong or your parents get divorced or, you know, all of the things that shape you.
Right.
And so I wasn't consciously doing those things, but they were kind of a natural instinct.
Yes.
And when I was young, I went to a creative and performing arts school, kind of like the TV show Fame.
Oh, I love it.
So danced, sang, you go to history class, you go to dance class, you go to math class, you go to music class, you go to English, you go to theater, you know. So I was performing and all of those things. And so that was 5th through 8th grade. And I'll make this story short. My parents had already gotten divorced by that time, and so in the great wisdom of a 13-year-old, I decided that I wanted to go live with my dad and stepmom for high school.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of karmic stuff that was being worked out with that.
Yes.
But the interesting piece is I went from being this creative, intuitive child, dancing, singing artist, fast forward a few years, and I got a math degree and went into the Air Force.
Interesting.
And it's like, you know, one of these things is not like the other, you know. So I did a complete and total flip. And so when I talk about as an empath, taking on the influences of the world around you and the messages that you're being told about what is correct or appropriate or right or successful or whatever, I drank the Kool-Aid. And I took my feminine, I took all of those creative, intuitive pieces, and I shoved them down, where they never went away.
Right.
I was still empathic. I've been an empath my whole life. I still felt everybody's everything, even in the Air Force. You know, can you imagine
I can't
being an empath in the Air Force?
Oh, my God, right.
So
that's wild.
When I left the Air Force, I was an Air Force officer. I was there for 10 years. And it wasn't so much, hey, I know what I'm going to do next. It's time to get out. It was, you know, my heart is telling me it's time to get out. What am I going to do now? And so my financial advisor with the company I'd been with for 10 years said, well, Steph, you're good with people. Have you thought about doing this? And so I kind of liken it now to like the first boy or the first person of the opposite sex that pays attention to you in grade school. It's like, oh, you like me? Oh, okay, I'll like you back. You know, it's like you just get all excited. So he was like, well, you'd be good at this. Do you want to do this? I was like, okay, yes, of course. Yeah, so it's still being totally, you know, not, I had no idea how to think for myself. No, I had no idea how to connect with that part of myself. So I went through the whole process, studied for my exams, set up my business, and quit after 5.5 months because I hated it.
Oh, now, tell me, what business was this?
Financial planning. Financial planning.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so I really thought that's what I was going to do for the next 10 or 15 years.
Right.
And that is what threw me headlong into my spiritual crisis, my spiritual awakening. I call it the spiritual crucible.
Oh, yeah.
Where there was a period of about 5 years where I was just getting cooked down. and alchemically changed into a different substance.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was, when I kind of stumbled out of the crucible where you're sort of like, whew, looking around going, okay, the planet's still here, I made it.
Right.
I realized that I had what felt like some nuggets of wisdom, that I had some perspective, that I had some experience, that I thought could help other people.
Yeah.
And so I started my business in 2007 with the intention of trying to make other people's sort of spiritual awakening or, process into consciousness less painful.
Yes.
To give them support, to give an explanation of what's happening at a subtle energetic level, to give them tools based on the experience that I went through of just, like I said, gnashing of teeth and cussing at God and just being lost.
Right. So many of us approach this thing from, I pulled myself up, here's how you can too. Or I figured this out, let me show you how to figure it out, right? And so along the way, you became a shaman.
I studied shamanism. I'm a shamanic practitioner, and I think I just had a natural predisposition towards it. And so when I found it, it just made sense, And so for me, these practices, they're how I live my life. It's not just a class I teach or something that I do when I'm in front of other people. A huge part of what I spend my time on is my spiritual practice, my spiritual growth, my personal journey. I am constantly digging into myself, going deeper, trying to understand myself more, heal more. That will be a pursuit for the rest of my life. It's who I am, it's what I value, it's how I'm built. And that process is going to benefit the people that I work with because I don't want to hold anything back. If I have an epiphany, if I have a realization or a new tool, I want to share that.
Yes.
So there's kind of multiple purposes being served by that. But that, living a shamanic life, just doing ceremony and honoring the rhythms and cycles of nature, and I could go on and on and on, but all of these things are how I conduct myself in life.
Right, absolutely. You live it rather than just teach it or practice it. You actually live it. And so you work with clients with shamanic principles and practices. You teach classes. You've got your website, which is?
It's bluestartemple.org.
bluestartemple.org. Great. And you are looking into creating online content.
Yes, and
That's exciting.
It is, and I'm very clear I'm in a transition period. I knew when my book sold that was a trajectory-changing moment, and that I was going to be in a process of shifting. And I know anybody who's an entrepreneur who does this kind of work, you do it long enough, you evolve.
You do.
Things fall off the menu, things get added to the menu as you shift and grow and find new things that excite you. It's like, what's juicy? What are you passionate about? And so what I've been sitting with for the last 6 to 9 months is this growing clarity that my greatest contribution to the world is meant to be my products. So this book is going to be one of many. I have ideas for oracle cards and home study programs and, kind of
workbooks.
On-demand products where you can go and watch on different get training or experiences on all kinds of different content, workbooks and downloadable pieces. So I am in the beginning stages of making that shift, and so I don't know exactly how all this is going to outpicture yet, but I do know that in the coming months I'm going to be introducing more ways in which people can interact with me, if you will, through these products and tools to assist them in their journey. So
that's exciting.
Yes, it is. It is.
I can't wait till your book is out. I know that's kind of the first step for you in broadening your reach, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's going to be huge. Good. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been so much fun. Yeah, and I really encourage anybody to reach out to Stephanie and find out what she has to offer, learn more about what it is to be an empath, how you can help yourself on that journey as well. Good. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Radiate Wellness is a community of holistic and alternative healers and consultants based in the Kansas City area, dedicated to helping you create spiritual, energetic, and physical well-being. To learn more about our practitioners, services, classes, and events, or to schedule an appointment, visit us at radiatewellnesscommunity.com.